The security camera caught her at 2 a.m., a small shadow slipping through the mansion's kitchen. But what billionaire tech mogul Adrian Blackwood discovered that night would change not just one life, but his own in ways he never imagined. Adrian Blackwood stood frozen in his home office, watching the security footage replay. A child, no more than 8 years old, was carefully opening his refrigerator, taking out yesterday's dinner leftovers, and eating them hurriedly in the corner of his kitchen. The timestamp showed 2:17 a.m. This had happened while he slept upstairs, oblivious in his penthouse suite that occupied the entire top floor of his Manhattan mansion. He zoomed in on the girl's face. There was something familiar about her features, something that tugged at his memory. The way she meticulously returned everything to its exact position, wiping down surfaces as she went, it spoke of someone who had done this before, someone who knew the consequences of being caught. But who was she? And how had she gotten past his state-of-the-art security system? Adrian's finger hovered over the intercom button to call security when something stopped him. The look in the child's eyes as she savored each bite, it wasn't mischief or rebellion. It was hunger. Raw, desperate hunger. He'd seen that look before, long ago, in a mirror. Before he could decide what to do, his phone rang. It was Maria, his head of household staff, calling in sick for the day. Her voice sounded strained, worried about more than just missing work. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Blackwood. My daughter's running a fever, and I can't leave her alone." "You have a daughter?" Adrian asked, surprised. Maria had worked for him for 3 years, and he realized with a pang of shame that he knew almost nothing about her life outside his home. "Yes, sir. Sophia. She's 8. Adrian's eyes darted back to the security monitor, to the paused image of the small intruder. The resemblance was suddenly clear. "Take all the time you need, Maria. And, when you return, I'd like to speak with you about something important." After hanging up, Adrian made a decision that would set in motion events he couldn't possibly foresee. Instead of alerting security or the police, he decided to wait. To watch. To understand. The next night, he stayed awake, lights off in the kitchen but with a clear view from his adjacent study. Sure enough, at 2:12 a.m., a small figure slipped through the service entrance using what appeared to be a copied key card. It was the same girl from the footage. Sophia. But tonight, Adrian had left something on the kitchen island, a proper meal under a warming dome, with a note, "You're welcome to this." No need to hide. What happened next would haunt Adrian for years to come. The girl approached the food cautiously, as if expecting a trap. When she read the note, her small body began to tremble. Instead of taking the meal, she backed away in terror, then turned and fled into the night. Adrian sat in stunned silence. What had he done wrong? Why would his gesture frighten her so badly? The answer came 3 days later when Maria returned to work, looking exhausted and thin. "Maria," he said gently after calling her to his office, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to know that your job is not in jeopardy. Does Sophia ever come here when you're working late?" The color drained from Maria's face. Her hands began to shake so badly that she had to clasp them together. "Mr. Blackwood, please, she's just a child. We've been evicted from our apartment, and we're staying in a shelter where they don't allow food in the rooms, and sometimes she gets so hungry at night." "Maria," Adrian interrupted softly, "I'm not angry." She looked up, confusion replacing fear. "You're not?" "No. But I am concerned. Why didn't you tell me you were struggling? Why didn't you ask for help?" Maria's eyes filled with tears. "The last family I worked for fired me when they found out I was a single mother. Before that, my employer tried to take advantage when he learned I was desperate. I've learned it's safer to keep my problems to myself." Adrian felt something crack inside him, a wall he'd built years ago when he'd clawed his way out of poverty and promised himself he'd never look back, never be vulnerable again. "Maria, I'd like to meet Sophia." properly this time. The meeting was arranged for that weekend. Adrian cleared his schedule, canceling a board meeting and a dinner with investors that his assistant insisted was crucial to the merger. None of it seemed important anymore. Sophia arrived clutching her mother's hand, eyes downcast, expecting punishment. Adrian knelt to her level, something he hadn't done for anyone in decades. "Sophia, I understand you've been visiting my kitchen," he said gently. She nodded, still not meeting his eyes. "You're very clever to figure out how to use your mother's key card. And very neat, too. I noticed you always clean up after yourself." This made her look up, surprised that she was being complimented rather than scolded. "I used to do the same thing," Adrian continued, his voice growing softer. "When I was about your age, I used to sneak into the cafeteria at school after hours. The janitor caught me once, but instead of reporting me, he started leaving a sandwich in his office for me every night." Sophia's eyes widened. "You were hungry too?" Adrian nodded, swallowing past the lump in his throat. "Very hungry. My mother worked 3 jobs, just like yours works very hard. But sometimes hard work isn't enough, is it?" Sophia shook her head solemnly. "That janitor changed my life because he showed me that someone cared. That I mattered. I've never forgotten him, though I never got to thank him properly." Adrian took a deep breath. "Sophia, would you and your mother do me the honor of having dinner with me tonight? I've had my chef prepare something special." That dinner was the first of many. Adrian learned that Maria had been working extra shifts cleaning offices at night after leaving his home, trying to save enough for a security deposit on a new apartment. Sophia, left alone at the shelter with only other children for supervision, had taken to following her mother to work and waiting outside until Maria's shift ended at midnight. On nights when hunger became too much to bear, she'd use the key card she'd secretly copied to slip into Adrian's kitchen, careful to take only what wouldn't be missed. Adrian's mind raced back to his own childhood as Maria shared their story. He remembered the gnawing pain of hunger, the shame of wearing the same clothes for weeks, the exhaustion in his mother's eyes when she returned from her 3rd job only to start cooking whatever meager meal they could afford. He remembered the wealthy homes she cleaned, homes where food was thrown away daily while they counted pennies for bread. "I was 9 when my mother collapsed from exhaustion," Adrian said quietly, surprising himself with the confession. He never spoke of his past. "She was hospitalized for 3 days. I stayed alone in our apartment, afraid that if anyone found out, they'd take me away from her." Maria reached across the table and, in a moment of shared humanity that transcended employer and employee, squeezed his hand. "What happened?" "A neighbor figured it out. Mrs. Abernathy. She brought me casseroles and sat with me until my mother came home. She never told the authorities." Adrian's voice grew distant. "She died before I made my first million. I never got to thank her either." Sophia, who had been quietly eating her dessert, looked up. "You could thank her by helping someone else. That's what my teacher says, when you can't pay back, you pay forward." Out of the mouths of babes. Adrian felt something shift inside him, like tectonic plates realigning after decades of pressure. "You're absolutely right, Sophia. And I think I'll start with you and your mother." Within a week, Adrian had moved Maria and Sophia into the guest house on his property. His staff was bewildered by the sudden change, especially his personal assistant, Vanessa, who had worked with him for 15 years and never seen him take a personal interest in an employee's welfare. "Adrian," she said during their morning briefing, using the familiarity earned through years of loyalty, "the board is concerned about your recent distractions." Adrian looked up from the architectural plan spread across his desk, designs for renovating the shelter where Maria and Sophia had stayed. "Distractions? You've cancelled 3 investor meetings this month. You skipped the technology summit in Tokyo. And now this shelter project that has nothing to do with our core business." Vanessa hesitated. "There are rumors you're having some sort of midlife crisis." Adrian laughed, a genuine sound that startled Vanessa. When was the last time she'd heard him laugh like that? Maybe I am, Vanessa. Or maybe I'm finally waking up. The shelter renovation was just the beginning. Adrian established a foundation to provide housing assistance to single parents working in domestic service. He implemented a company-wide policy guaranteeing living wages and comprehensive benefits to all employees, including household staff. He started showing up at company events with Maria and Sophia, introducing them not as his maid and her daughter, but as the family who reminded me what matters. The business press had a field day. Blackwood gone soft, read one headline. Billionaire's bizarre behavior, mental health concerns or genuine change of heart, read another. Adrian's board of directors called an emergency meeting, concerned that his new focus on social responsibility would impact shareholder value. Adrian walked into the boardroom where 12 stern faces awaited him. These were people he'd once considered peers, fellow warriors in the battlefield of high finance. Now they looked like strangers, with their expensive suits and calculated expressions of concern. "Gentlemen, ladies," he began, "I understand you're worried about the direction of the company." "Adrian," said Howard Mercer, the longest-serving board member, "we've supported your leadership for 15 years. But these recent initiatives are costing millions with no return on investment. The shelter renovations, the wage increases, the scholarship programs, they're admirable charity work, but they're not business decisions." Adrian nodded thoughtfully. "What would you say if I told you our employee retention has increased by 23% since implementing the new wage policies? That productivity is up 17%? That our public approval rating has reached an all-time high, driving consumer engagement beyond our projections?" The board members exchanged glances. "But more importantly," Adrian continued, "what would you say if I told you that none of that matters to me anymore? That I've realized there's more to life than quarterly earnings reports and stock options?" Howard's face reddened. "I'd say you've lost your mind. This company isn't your personal charity, Adrian. We have a fiduciary responsibility to our shareholders." "You're right," Adrian said calmly. "Which is why I've decided to take the company private again. I'm buying back all outstanding shares at a 30% premium over market value." The room erupted in chaos. Questions, objections, and outright accusations flew across the table. Adrian waited until the noise subsided. "My offer is more than generous. And non-negotiable." He stood up, straightening his jacket. "I built this company from nothing. I've made all of you very wealthy in the process. Now I'm choosing to use that wealth differently. You're welcome to join me in this new vision, or you can take your profits and invest elsewhere." As he walked out of the boardroom, Adrian felt lighter than he had in years. The decision had been forming in his mind ever since that night he'd watched Sophia eating leftovers in his kitchen, a child so hungry she'd risk breaking into a billionaire's home just to eat what he would have thrown away. Back at the mansion, Adrian found Sophia sitting at the kitchen counter, homework spread before her. Maria was at the stove, preparing dinner. The domestic scene struck him with its simple beauty. This was what a home should feel like. "How was your meeting?" Maria asked, noticing his expression. "Transformative," Adrian replied with a smile. "I think I just burned some very expensive bridges." Maria looked concerned. "Because of us?" "Because of me," Adrian corrected her. "Because it's time I used my resources for something that actually matters." Sophia looked up from her math problems. "Did you get in trouble?" Adrian laughed. "A little bit. But sometimes trouble is worth it." That night, after Maria and Sophia had returned to the guest house, Adrian sat alone in his vast living room, thinking about the path ahead. His phone buzzed with messages from board members, lawyers, financial advisors, all demanding explanations, threatening consequences. He silenced it and instead pulled up the security footage from that fateful night. There she was again, tiny Sophia, carefully opening his refrigerator, taking only what wouldn't be missed, cleaning up after herself. He watched her savor each bite of cold pasta as if it were a gourmet meal. He watched her wrap a dinner roll in a napkin, presumably to take back to her mother. In that moment, Adrian made another decision. He called his lawyer. 3 months later, Adrian stood in the newly renovated shelter, now called New Beginnings Family Center. The dormitory-style rooms had been converted into private family apartments. The institutional cafeteria was now a warm, welcoming community kitchen where families could cook together. There was a playground, a computer lab, a medical clinic, and a job training center. Mr. Blackwood, said the shelter director, a formidable woman named Gloria who had initially been suspicious of his intentions, "I've worked in social services for 30 years, and I've never seen anything like this. You've created something truly transformative here." Adrian shook his head. "I just provided the funding. You and your team created this. Don't sell yourself short," Gloria insisted. "Money without vision is just money. You had the vision." "Actually," Adrian said, watching as Sophia showed a younger child how to use one of the new computers, "she had the vision. I just had the resources to make it happen." The shelter was just the beginning. Over the next 2 years, Adrian's foundation opened similar centers in 12 cities. He established scholarship programs for the children of service workers. He funded research into sustainable housing solutions for low-income families. And through it all, Maria and Sophia remained at the heart of his new life. Sophia thrived under Adrian's mentorship. The once hungry child blossomed into a confident, compassionate preteen with a particular talent for mathematics and a determination to use that talent to help others. Adrian hired tutors to nurture her gifts, but it was the time he spent with her himself, helping with homework, discussing books, teaching her to play chess, that made the greatest difference. Maria, too, found a new path. Adrian encouraged her to pursue the nursing degree she'd abandoned when she became pregnant with Sophia. With his support, she enrolled in classes, eventually becoming the healthcare coordinator for the foundation, bringing medical services to the very communities she'd once belonged to. 5 years after that night in the kitchen, Adrian received a letter. It was from the janitor who had once left sandwiches for him, Mr. Reyes, now elderly but still sharp of mind. One of Adrian's interviews about the foundation had gone viral, and in it, he'd mentioned the janitor who had shown him kindness when he was hungry. "I never thought you would remember those sandwiches," Mr. Reyes wrote. "I was just doing what anyone should do when they see a hungry child. To know that such a small act of kindness helped shape your life is the greatest gift of my old age." Adrian flew Mr. Reyes to New York, put him up in the finest hotel, and arranged a dinner with Maria and Sophia. As they sat together, 4 people whose lives had been connected by hunger and kindness, Adrian proposed a toast. "To the moments that change us," he said, raising his glass. "And to having the courage to let them." Mr. Reyes, his hands gnarled with arthritis but his eyes bright with emotion, added, "and to remembering where we came from, no matter where we go." That night, after their guests had gone, Adrian sat with Sophia on the terrace overlooking the city lights. She was 13 now, no longer the frightened child he'd first encountered, but a young person with dreams and opinions and a fierce determination to make a difference. "Adrian," she said, using his first name as he'd insisted years ago, "do you ever miss your old life? Being just a regular billionaire who didn't have to worry about all these people?" Adrian considered the question seriously, as he always did with Sophia. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity," he admitted. "It's easier to focus on profit margins than on human lives. Numbers are predictable, people aren't." "But?" Sophia prompted, knowing him well enough to hear the unspoken qualification. "But I was never happy then. Successful, yes. Respected, certainly. But not happy." Adrian looked at her, this child who had changed everything. "I had everything and nothing at the same time." Sophia nodded thoughtfully. "My mom says you saved us. But I think maybe we saved you too." Adrian felt his throat tighten with emotion. Your mom is very wise. On Sophia's 14th birthday, Adrian presented her with a letter. Inside was the deed to a building, the very shelter where she and Maria had once stayed, now transformed into the flagship New Beginning Center. The deed had been transferred to a trust in Sophia's name, to be managed by the foundation until her 25th birthday, when she would take control. Your mom is very wise. On Sophia's 14th birthday, Adrian presented her with a letter. Inside was the deed to a building, the very shelter where she and Maria had once stayed, now transformed into the flagship New Beginning Center. The deed had been transferred to a trust in Sophia's name, to be managed by the foundation until her 25th birthday, when she would take control. This is too much, Maria protested when she realized what Adrian had done. Sophia is just a child. A child who changed my life, Adrian replied. Besides, I'm not giving her responsibility now. I'm giving her something to work toward, a legacy to build on. Sophia held the document with trembling hands. I don't understand. Why would you give this to me? Adrian knelt beside her chair, taking her small hands in his. Because someday, you'll understand what it means to have the power to help others. And when that day comes, I want you to have the resources to do it. This building isn't just property, it's a promise that the work we've started will continue. That night, after the celebration, Adrian found himself unable to sleep. He wandered through his mansion, a place that had once felt like a trophy but now felt strangely empty despite the warmth Maria and Sophia had brought into his life. He realized that while he'd changed so much about his business and philanthropic work, he'd changed very little about his personal life. The next morning, he made another decision. He called his architect. 6 months later, Adrian moved out of the mansion. He converted the entire property into a residential education center for children from the shelters, a place where they could live and learn in safety while their parents rebuilt their lives. He moved into a modest but comfortable apartment near Maria and Sophia's new home, a home he had helped them purchase but that was entirely theirs. The business press had a field day with this latest development. Blackwood gives away mansion, mental health crisis deepens, read one particularly nasty headline. Adrian laughed when he saw it, showing it to Sophia over breakfast. Do you think I'm crazy? He asked her, only half joking. Sophia considered the question with the seriousness that was so characteristic of her. I think you're finding out who you really are, she said finally. And I think that scares some people. Out of the mouths of babes, Adrian murmured. As the years passed, Adrian's foundation expanded its work. The New Beginning Centers spread to 30 cities across the country. The scholarship program sent hundreds of children to college who might otherwise never have had the chance. The housing initiatives provided safe, affordable homes for thousands of families. And through it all, Adrian, Maria, and Sophia remained a family, not by blood or legal documents, but by choice and love and shared purpose. When Sophia turned 16, she came to Adrian with a proposal of her own. She had been volunteering at the original New Beginning Center, working with children who reminded her of herself, hungry, frightened, but resilient. She had noticed something: while the center provided excellent support for families in crisis, there was a gap in services for the children who had experienced food insecurity. They don't know how to have a healthy relationship with food, she explained to Adrian as they sat in his office. They either hoard it because they're afraid of being hungry again, or they develop unhealthy eating patterns. I want to create a program specifically addressing childhood food trauma. Adrian listened, impressed as always by her insight and compassion. What would this program look like? Sophia had clearly thought it through. Nutritional education, cooking classes, therapeutic gardening, and psychological support, all focused on helping kids heal their relationship with food. I've already talked to some experts who are willing to help develop the curriculum. And what do you need from me? Adrian asked, though he already knew he would give her whatever she requested. Funding to pilot the program at 3 centers. And your help convincing the board that a 17-year-old has something valuable to contribute. Sophia smiled wryly. Some of them still see me as the little girl who stole leftovers. Adrian felt a surge of pride so intense it almost overwhelmed him. They'll see you as I do, as one of the wisest people I know, regardless of age. The program, which they named Nourish, became one of the Foundation's most successful initiatives. Within 2 years, it had expanded to all 30 centers and had been adopted by other organizations working with food-insecure populations. Sophia was invited to speak at conferences, consulted by government agencies, and featured in academic journals, all before her 20th birthday. On the night of her high school graduation, Adrian, Maria, and Sophia sat together on the balcony of Maria's home, looking out at the city lights. Sophia had been accepted to several prestigious universities, all offering full scholarships in recognition of her academic achievements and community work. "I've been thinking," Sophia said, breaking a comfortable silence, "about what I want to do with my life." Maria and Adrian exchanged glances. They had carefully avoided pressuring her about her future, wanting her to make her own choices. "And what have you decided?" Maria asked. "I want to become a pediatrician specializing in children from disadvantaged backgrounds. And then I want to come back and work at the medical clinics in our centers." Sophia looked at Adrian. "I want to be for other children what you've been for me, someone who sees their potential, not just their problems." Adrian felt tears prick his eyes. "I think that's a wonderful plan. But I need to ask you something," Sophia continued, suddenly serious. "All these years, you've given us so much. You've changed our lives completely. Why? You could have just called security that night. You could have fired Mom. You could have gone on with your life and never thought about us again." Adrian was silent for a long moment, gathering his thoughts. "When I saw you in that kitchen, eating leftovers that I wouldn't have missed, something broke open inside me. I saw myself, the hungry child I once was. And I saw all the ways I had betrayed that child by becoming a man who had so much but shared so little." He reached for Maria's hand, then Sophia's. "You didn't just remind me of my past, you showed me a different future. A future where success isn't measured by what you have, but by what you give. A future where no child goes hungry while others throw away food. A future where we recognize our common humanity." Maria squeezed his hand. "You've created that future, Adrian. For so many people." Adrian shook his head. "We've created it together. All 3 of us." As Sophia prepared to leave for college, Adrian faced another turning point. For 8 years, his life had revolved around Maria, Sophia, and the Foundation. With Sophia moving away and Maria now running the healthcare programs independently, he found himself at loose ends. "You should start dating," Maria told him bluntly one evening as they shared dinner. "Find someone to share your life with." Adrian nearly choked on his wine. "I'm 53 years old, Maria. A bit old for the dating scene." Maria rolled her eyes. "Nonsense. You're Adrian Blackwood. Women would line up around the block." "That's exactly the problem," Adrian sighed. "They'd be lining up for Adrian Blackwood, billionaire philanthropist. Not for me." "Then find someone who knew you before," Maria suggested. "Someone who sees the real you." The idea took root. A few weeks later, Adrian reached out to Vanessa, his former personal assistant who had left the company when he took it private. She had been one of the few people who had stood by him during his transformation, even when she didn't fully understand it. Their first dinner was awkward, years of professional boundaries didn't dissolve easily. But by the third dinner, they had rediscovered the easy rapport that had made them an effective team for so many years. By the sixth dinner, Adrian realized he was falling in love for the first time in his life. When Sophia came home for Thanksgiving break, Adrian nervously introduced her and Maria to Vanessa as his girlfriend. To his relief, they welcomed her warmly. "It's about time," Sophia whispered to him as they cleared the dinner dishes. You've spent so much time taking care of everyone else. You deserve someone who takes care of you. Life settled into a new pattern. Sophia excelled at university, coming home during breaks to work at the foundation. Maria continued to expand the healthcare programs, becoming a respected figure in public health circles. Adrian and Vanessa built a relationship based on mutual respect and shared values, eventually marrying in a small ceremony with Maria as maid of honor and Sophia as bridesmaid. The foundation continued to grow, but Adrian was careful to maintain its core mission, helping families break the cycle of poverty through housing, education, and healthcare. He never forgot that it had all started with a hungry child eating leftovers in his kitchen. 10 years after that fateful night, Adrian received an invitation to speak at a national conference on childhood poverty. As he prepared his remarks, he reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. He had once been a man who measured success in dollars and cents, in acquisitions and market share. Now he measured it in families housed, children educated, lives transformed. He had once been alone in his massive mansion, surrounded by possessions but empty of purpose. Now he was surrounded by love, the love of his wife, Vanessa, the love of Maria and Sophia, who had become his family in all the ways that mattered, and the love of the communities he served. On the day of the conference, Adrian stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces. Experts, advocates, policymakers, all gathered to discuss solutions to a problem that had once seemed insurmountable to him. 10 years ago, he began, I caught a child stealing leftovers from my kitchen. He told the story, their story, of how one small moment of connection had sparked a movement that had helped thousands of families. He spoke of Maria's courage, Sophia's wisdom, and his own journey from wealth to worth. As he concluded his remarks, he saw Sophia sitting in the front row, now a medical student on her way to fulfilling her dream of becoming a pediatrician. Beside her sat Maria, who had recently been appointed to a national commission on healthcare access. Behind them was Vanessa, whose strategic mind had helped the foundation maximize its impact. The greatest poverty, Adrian said, is not the absence of money, but the absence of connection. When we truly see each other, when we recognize our common humanity, that's when transformation begins. Not just for those who receive help, but for those who give it. The applause was thunderous, but Adrian barely heard it. He was looking at Sophia, seeing not the poised young woman she had become, but the hungry child who had changed his life with her courage and her need. After the conference, a reporter asked him what he considered his greatest achievement. Without hesitation, Adrian pointed to Sophia. Not because I had anything to do with the amazing person she's become, he clarified. But because she had everything to do with the person I've become. That evening, the four of them, Adrian, Vanessa, Maria, and Sophia, sat together in Adrian's apartment, sharing a meal and memories. Do you ever regret it? Sophia asked Adrian suddenly. Giving up the corporate life, the mansion, the private jets? You could have had so much more. Adrian looked around the table at the three women who had taught him what truly mattered. I have everything I need, he said simply. And more importantly, I've learned the difference between what I need and what I want. That's a lesson worth more than all the billions in the world. As they raised their glasses in a toast, Adrian thought about the security camera footage he still kept, a reminder of how a single moment of compassion could change not just one life, but countless others. A reminder that sometimes, the greatest gifts come in the most unexpected packages. And somewhere, he liked to think, the janitor who had once left sandwiches for a hungry boy was smiling. If this story touched your heart, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more stories that remind us of our shared humanity and the power we all have to change lives, one compassionate choice at a time.